So the general outline of what I'm going to talk about is we'll discuss about the users of the web, like what types of users are there on the web. We'll also talk about these three principles, which is usability, inclusive design, and accessibility. And then we'll just now start focusing on accessibility because that's what we are talking about today. I'll also share practical tips for how to improve accessibility, and then I will also share the resources that I have, and then we'll get into question and answer. So let's begin with users of the web. So when we are building our products, we usually have a target group. For example, if you're building a library management system or something, you can say that your users are students. So this is how most people think about users of the web. But in reality, we have a diverse group of people. So even amongst these students, you have different types of students. You have students of a particular age group. You have students of a particular culture. You have students who have, disabilities, etc. So this is what I'm going to be talking about. So after identifying your target group, inside that target group, there's also a diverse set of human beings, and human beings are very diverse. So if we understand how all these people navigate and experience the web, we are able to build our products in a way that gives more people a better experience. So if we acknowledge and address the diverse needs of different users, then you can create more inclusive experiences that cater to the global nature of the web. So I broke down users into 4 groups. There's definitely more than this, but I wanted us to discuss this so that you can begin to see how the web is, it has like a diverse set of people. So number 1, we have users with disabilities. And these are individuals with a wide range of disabilities, such as visual, hearing, motor, and cognitive impairments. So you can see even in this group of people with disabilities, you still have subgroups. So blind people use the web differently, deaf people use the web differently, things like that. So you need to understand all these groups as well. Then we have users of different age groups. So we have diverse age demographics, including teens, adults, and the elderly. We know right now this whole idea, we have Gen Zs, we have older people. So if you have a product that is to be used by all these different age groups, then you need to understand how, people 60 and above, how they use and navigate the web, and what appeals to Gen Z demographics. So if you understand that, you're able to build your product in a way that can be appealing to both these groups of people. Then we have users of different cultures. We have people with various cultural backgrounds, and everyone has different experiences, and people have different expectations and interpretations to web content. So it's best to understand how different cultures perceive things so that you are not building products that might be considered offensive in a different culture. And especially when we know that people hold their cultures to very high regard. And then we also have users on different devices and network capabilities. So not everybody has a MacBook or an iPhone. Not everybody is going to be in 4G or 5G. We are mixed, right? So we have diverse devices with different resources, and we also have different network capabilities. Even if you are in 5G, 5 steps away, you might move, or you get into a car and suddenly you're in Edge or you're in 3G. So how do you build your product in a way that these kinds of scenarios are not going to interrupt the experience of your users? And this is important because sometimes developers think about, that's a UX person's job, or a UI something. It's not really a dev who cares about these, but we are the ones who are actually building the products. So we need to ensure that our products are actually programmatically accessible to these groups of people. The UI and UX side of things, they also have their own things to focus on. But for us, as we build programmatically, we need to ensure that we are considering all these different people. So let's talk about these 3 principles. when I began understanding or spending time to know how to build the web in a way that can be accessible for everyone, I was confused by these three terms, and these sometimes I use it interchangeably, which makes sense because all these three, the end goal is to ensure that the web can be used by everyone, but they are also quite different. So, for example, usability, it ensures that products are easy and efficient for users to navigate and interact with in an intuitive way. So it doesn't matter which user at what particular time. It could be a user with a disability. It could be an old user. It could be a user with really poor connectivity. At any point, these different users, are they able to come to your product, and are they able to understand what they're supposed to do, and are they able to accomplish it successfully? So are the error messages displayed in an intuitive way? Do you, if you have like a network failure, what is your backup? Or do you just show an error page, which is frustrating? Or do you have like options in case your product is offline? What do you show to this particular user so that they're not able to lose interest? They're still able to interact with your product. So that's usability. And then we have inclusive design. This aims to consider the full range of human diversity. So inclusive design is the general umbrella. So it understands, because what we are building is for humans, and humans are very different. We have like a diverse set of users. So inclusive design is understanding all these types of users that we have, understanding their different ways that they're navigating the web, and how, like, what needs do they have and how do we meet them. So how do we build for that with understanding all these different diverse human users that we have. Then we have accessibility, and this is fully focused on people who have disabilities. So accessibility is a subgroup of inclusive design. And even with accessibility, if we focus on building products for people with disabilities, it makes the whole product much, much better for other people. Case in point is right now, most people don't watch movies without captions. You have to have the caption on, but that is a disability feature actually, and that's for people who have hearing impairments. They can't hear sound, so they have to rely on closed captions. But as you can see, it makes things much better for everybody else. So accessibility is actually very good for your product. So now let's talk about accessibility. So the inventor of the World Wide Web, his name is Tim Berners-Lee. He said, access by everyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect. So that's basically what accessibility is, focusing on providing access to people with disabilities. So now let's quickly talk through the types of disabilities and how they use the web. So we have people with visual impairments. This group includes individuals who are blind, they have low vision or have color blindness, and they might use screen readers. A screen reader we refer to it as an assistive technology. So it's an extra technology that they use to navigate the web, to pass. Like they're using an extra technology to get through the web, as opposed to you who's just directly interacting with like whatever you have in front of you. Then we have people with hearing impairments. These are users who are deaf or hard of hearing, and they may rely on captions, transcripts or sign language videos for multimedia content. So you need to keep in mind, if you have media in your website, how are you ensuring that people who are hard of hearing or deaf are able to perceive this information? And then we have people with motor disabilities. So this includes users who may have difficulty using a mouse or keyboard. So they also rely on these alternative input devices. These are also called assistive technologies. So you need to programmatically build your products in a way that assistive tech can be able to also use them. Then we have people with cognitive and learning disabilities. These are users like people with dyslexia, ADHD, autism, and other cognitive impairments. And these type of people, they benefit from clear and simple and consistent navigation, as well as content that is easy to read and understand. So you need to consider this as well as you're building for your product. So now let's get to the practical tips for accessibility. So this is a list of things that I'm going to go through. So I'll just read them out. Use better HTML, i.e. semantics. Label and describe your forms. Describe your images, proper heading structure, keep the focus, and understand area. So here we have the first one, which is use better HTML, i.e. semantics. In HTML elements, there are different types of elements. You've seen the div, you've seen the p tag, you've seen the span, you've seen the main, you've seen the, which other one is popular, the header, the title. These are all HTML elements. But sometimes we don't use them for their right purpose. So for example, you might have a button or a text, but then you use a div for that. That is problematic. And while a sighted user can be able to see this, they'll be able to see the button. Like you have a div, but then you put in CSS, now it looks like a button. Someone who can see, they won't struggle with it. But someone who is using assistive tech, like a screen reader, it's going to be problematic because the screen reader won't be able to have access to that div and communicate it to, let's say this user is blind, that, we are now at a button. They'll just find a div, and divs are usually ignored because div is very general. It's just mostly useful layout, like just layouting your page. So if you put things inside divs, then a blind person will not be able to perceive it. So you can just maybe close your eyes, and if you have things in divs, it's going to be blank to this person who is using assistive tech for it. So if a semantic element exists for what you want to implement, then use it. If a button is there, please use it. If a p tag is there, please use it. So semantic elements have accessibility features already built into them. And like they're communicated to these assistive tech, like screen readers, in a proper way. So users of assistive technology rely on proper semantics of the web page, and it also enables proper keyboard navigation. So in this example, for this keyboard navigation, if you have a button and you use a button, if you use your keyboard to navigate the website, it will actually go to that button, and you can press the space bar, you can press enter, and you can be able to interact with it. But if you use a div and you have it as a button, then maybe you give it an on click. So at that point, you can only use a mouse. You cannot navigate with it using a keyboard. And so if your mouse users, maybe they lose their mouse, or maybe they break their arm or something, their primary arm to use the mouse, they'll need to navigate with a keyboard. So at that point, you will lose a large number of users because your product you're not using proper semantics, and now we can't use your product with keyboard etc. So here's an example. This is an image to show how a proper HTML structure is much, much better. And it's actually even beautiful code to read. If you're given code to, they ask you change this something in the footer, and you go to the code base and it's just divs, it takes a longer time to know exactly where the footer is. But you see on this other side, you can see, okay, here's the header, here's the section, here's the footer. And it's much, much easier to read. And it's also much easier for users of assistive tech to also perceive what's on your website. Then we have label and describe your forms. We have placeholder text that are not available to screen readers. So here's an example. This is like a short video. Usually you would find sometimes you have an input and then you have this placeholder right here as first name. When it's a placeholder like this, it cannot be accessed by screen reader users. So a screen reader will get to this input and it will just read out input. So if you're blind, you don't know exactly what you're supposed to be filling here. So you need to actually provide labels to your inputs so that when the screen reader gets here, it reads input and then it lets the user know that it's the first name that they're supposed to fill in here. The other problem with placeholder text is sometimes when they're in here, they're usually lighter in color. So you also still have people with visual impairments who they can see but not too well. the contrast is not there enough. So they won't even be able to read what's in this placeholder text. That's the first issue. The second issue is when you start to fill in, let's say you come here, you see the placeholder says, okay, first name. Then I start to fill it, and then I get distracted for a minute. Then when I come back, I'm just seeing an input with a few letters that I had started entering. So at this point, I'm confused. I don't even know what I was entering here. So I have to delete everything to see the placeholder again. So it's best to always have a label, and it should be outside of your input, and it should also be very, very descriptive. Now we get to images. You should always describe your images because only people who can see can perceive that image. People who are blind or visually impaired, they cannot see the images, and especially if it has important information in it. So if you're providing instructions inside an image and you expect everybody to understand it, it will be problematic because a blind person won't know. When a screen reader encounters an image that does not have a description, and the description is usually placed in an attribute in the image HTML tag, that's where you put your description to be read by the screen reader. So when a screen reader encounters an image like this and it does not have a description and it's important, it will just read out. Sometimes it reads out the file location, so it will start reading the domain /this/this/ something.png. So if you don't provide the description, it's going to be it's not going to be a good experience for users with screen reader. But at the same time, we know that images, not all images are supposed to be, some of them are just for aesthetics, to make your website look good. So for that, images for decoration do not need a description. So you just provide an empty description and then the screen reader will ignore it. So a user who's blind doesn't really care, if the image is for aesthetics, they don't really, it doesn't matter to them. So here is also another example of a user who is blind. They encounter an image. They don't know what's there, but the image has a description and it lets the user say that I'm a horse eating cereal. So now that the blind user now can be like, okay, I can now imagine that, so I know what you are. Then we have proper heading structure. This provides flow for screen reader users, and inconsistent headers provide a confusing experience for screen reader users as well. So we also have this common practice among devs where you put text inside maybe a p tag. Let's say you've tried, you're using semantic HTML, so it's a p tag that is text, but then you start styling it to look like this is a H1 tag. There's usually H1 to H6 for the headers. So you give heading 1 a particular font size and a font weight, and then you make it look very big. Then you have H2, you start reducing the sizes all the way to H6. So me, when I come to your website, I can see. So I'll be able to quickly skim and I'll be like, okay, this is the main heading. Okay, these are the, subheadings. This is this and that. Okay, I know what this website is about. But for that same scenario, for a screen reader user, they won't be able to know. They can't skim through your content. So all the p tag, it will just be, the headings will be together with all the other p tags in your website, all the content. So they won't be able to tell, the main heading and the content for the main heading ends here, and then we have H2 starting here, things like that. So we need to actually use proper heading structure, and this is also part of semantic HTML. So the p tag is for the text, and then the H1 to H6 tags, those are for the headings. So here's an example of a website that has correct headings. This is, I took a screenshot. I was using a tool, and I'll highlight what tool this is. You can also use tools to ensure that your product is accessible and that the content and the layout is in the right manner. So I used the correct HTML semantics. So I have a header, I have navigation, and then I have a main. So for a sighted user, they'll just come to this section of the website. I'll just see, okay, web accessibility tutorials, that's the header. At the top, I cut out the screenshot, sorry for that, but there's navigation at the top, and then we have heading here, and then at the bottom there's the footer. For a blind person, this is what will be presented to them. So if you've used the correct semantic elements, HTML elements, they'll know there's a header, there's a navigation, there's a main section. In that main section, we have the first heading, which is web accessibility tutorials. Then they'll have these other 3 headings, and then we have the footer. Then they're like, oh, okay, I kind of understand what the content is in this website. So it's really good to have headers in a correct way. And then keep the focus. So the focus is, with links, when you have links on your website and you use a keyboard to tab to them, there's usually that blue outline. We need to keep this. This is something that should be kept. Sometimes you have UX designers who don't like that blue aspect and they remove it and they're like, okay, it doesn't look well with the design that I have. But if you're using a mouse and then you hover on top of a link, it gives it like a different styling. So users who are using a mouse, they don't struggle. But if I now start to tab through and maybe I don't have my mouse or something of the sort, I won't be able to know where I am because the focus is not there. So I won't be able to know exactly which part of the page I'm in. So if you feel like this focus is ugly, you can always style it to look differently and to match your designs. So here is also another video to show what exactly I'm talking about. So if I'm tabbing with a keyboard, I'm able to know, okay, I'm at this particular link. But if I remove it, a user won't be able to know, especially if I'm navigating with a keyboard. So this is very important. And then check your colors. Colors they're very appealing, like they make your website look better. And they also communicate, what your website is about. If, like banking applications prefer blue, things like that. So colors are very important. But at the same time, we also need to be careful how we use them. If we are using them to display information, you need to combine them with something extra. A good example is you can have an input tag in a form. You know how sometimes you have a form, you fill it, and then you press submit, and it doesn't go. But then you have like 2 inputs. It has a red around them, so you have a red border or a red outline. For someone who can see them, like, oh, okay, this is wrong, or maybe this I didn't fill it in the correct way, so they correct it, and they press submit and they move on. But someone who is colorblind and they're not able to perceive this red, they'll come back to the form and they won't see anything. To them, everything is probably gray and black. So they're not able to know that there's something wrong with a certain input field. So whenever you're using colors to portray information, you should add something extra. So maybe you can add text and say, you need to fill this, this and that, things like that. And also with data visualization, sometimes if you're portraying information with just blocks of color, it can be difficult for some users because they'll just see the same color. So you need to add something more. So in this particular example, as you can see, this is a colorblind user or a user who, color do not interpret it the same way other people might. So they've added patterns so they can be able to differentiate, okay, this is, the dotted ones, it's not the same as the ones with waves. So that's important as well. And then you can also have a checklist. So when you start learning about accessibility, there's a lot of things you need to keep in mind. So even what I've talked about is just sort of like an introduction, an example of things that you can actually start working on. But there's a lot more to this. So you can start putting together a checklist because you can't keep all of these things at your fingertips. So you need to have a checklist for, okay, when it comes to images, what do I need to remember? When it comes to the forms, what do I need to remember? When it comes to icons, what do I need to remember? When it comes to buttons, what do I need to remember? To headings, what do I need to remember? To the layout page of my website, what do I need to remember? So this is really good, and it starts a good accessibility culture. And it also reminds developers what to keep an eye on. So as you're building your button, you go and check out that checklist. Okay, I've used the correct HTML semantic element for it. I've given it a good description, things like that. So an example of ways to incorporate this is you can add it to like your pull request template. As you're working in teams and using GitHub, you raise a pull request, and this is when you want your code to be reviewed. So before you bring other people to review your code, you can have like a checklist that you need to check before you start asking other people to review your code. So this is an example of a checklist of a form from one of the accessibility websites out there. So as you can see here, it's forms, and then they have all these pointers. So for example, all inputs in a form are associated with a corresponding label element. So you check that. So you're not using just placeholders. Then you come here, use field set and legend elements where appropriate. Field set and legend elements, they're usually to group different sections of a form. You can read more about them in MDN docs. If you don't understand what the elements are, you go and understand them and make sure that they're used correctly in your form. Make sure that form input errors are displayed in list above the form after submission. So you need to understand how the errors are being perceived, things like that. So this is an example. Make sure you meet all these checklists, and then you proceed with code reviews and merging your code and deploying it. And then we have something called Understand ARIA. So I won't go deep into ARIA. ARIA is a bit more advanced, but I'm mentioning it here so that you're aware that there's something called ARIA. So ARIA supplements your product and makes sure that they're more accessible. So we have all these HTML semantic elements, right, that I've mentioned and I've talked about, but there are things that do not have semantic element. For example, like a carousel, that one you can't find, there's no HTML element for it, or an accordion, there's no HTML element for it. So you need another way to communicate this to a user with a screen reader, right? So that's where ARIA comes in. So it's called Accessible Rich Internet Applications. It can be a bit overwhelming to understand. They have so many attributes. And by attributes, I mean you add, the way you have attributes HTML, for example, an input, you have a type is text or type is radio, right? Things like that, or an image, alt is the description. So those attributes, those are these ARIA attributes. So there are quite a number, and each of them has particular purposes. So it helps to spend time understanding it, and it's understandable if it's a lot to take in at once because they're quite a lot. But it's very good to understand them so that you're able to build your products in an accessible way. So that's all. It was just a brief introduction. I didn't show any code, I'm sorry, but I hope that you've understood what I'm talking about, and I hope you go and think much better about how you're building your products and the users that you're building for. Thank you. Credits for all the images and GIFs that I've used are from these people. And these are the resources that I wanted to share with you. I have not linked them yet. So when I share them with Douglas, I'll have added the links so you can access them easily. And let's move to questions.